My name is Erin Colburn. I'm the Pre-Health Advising Coordinator for the College of Health Sciences here at Boise State University. I'm joined with individuals, representatives from Roseman University College of Dental Medicine in Utah, and I'm excited to have them speak to students about their program. And I do believe they have a couple of their students who are currently residing at their institution to share a little bit of information as well. Alicia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am the Manager for Admissions and Student Affairs here at Roseman. On this call as well, we do have Dr. Harmon. I'll let him say a little bit about himself.
Oh, you want me to do that now? Okay.
I do.
Yeah. I was one of the founding deans of Roseman. I've been here since the beginning of the dental school, not the entire university, but the dental school. And I'm associate dean for, Admissions and Student Affairs. I usually refer to it as Havoc and Mayhem because it's more accurate as a description. But we have a lot of fun. I'm chair of the admissions committee. We have several members of the admissions team on this call with us, so we'll be able to, I think, to answer just about anything that you might have. Courtney and Amy, if you're at a place where you could turn on your cameras, we really would love to see you because we like talking with people. If we could, and for anybody who joins us, thank you. I appreciate that. Chris? Hey, he's still muted. There we go.
Chris as in Chris Monk?
Yes.
Sorry, Bill. I didn't know if you were referring to someone else with their cameras. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Monk. I am the Associate Dean for Graduate Education at Roseman University. I was born and raised in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and spent most of my life in Idaho. So it's nice to talk with those who are of like-minded attitudes. Anyway, very nice to be with you today.
Professor Novak.
Hey, I'm Rachel Novak. I am an anatomy professor at Roseman. Scott is currently in the middle of head and neck 2 anatomy. So if you choose to come to Roseman, we'll spend a lot of hours together learning about the human body.
Scott.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Kane. I'm a current D1 transitioning to D2. As Professor Novak stated, I'm currently in head and neck 2 right now and doing some preclinical studies.
And the fact that he's on live proves that people do indeed survive our curriculum. So this is good. Annie.
Hi, I'm Annie. I'm the administrative assistant for admissions and student affairs. So when you call in with any questions or emails, it'll be either me or Alicia who you speak to.
I'm going to get started and tell you a little bit about what's going on, but I have a very important question to ask you first. Is the football field still blue?
Absolutely.
Okay, double checking. That was
We're
one of
the
my
only ones allowed to do it.
takeaways from the last time I was on campus. Just an amazing place. So it's very good. Just as a little bit of history, I actually started teaching when I was 13, and I'm now in my 6th year of education. I had to think about the math there. Yes, I'm ancient, I get that, but nonetheless, I've been around for a while, and I've been in dental education since 1986 and had some involvement as a consultant with education before that. I've been at 4 dental schools as dean of students and 1 executive associate dean. I visited 49 of the programs. And I will tell you, there's some good dental schools out there. So I want you to understand that the purpose for tonight, for our conversation this evening, is not to talk you into coming to Roseman. What we want to do is to talk with you about our approach to education and then ask you the question if that makes sense to you for what you're after. By the way, thank you for turning your cameras on. It's so much more fun seeing people when we talk, because that's a lot of our program, as you'll gather as we go through the presentation, is designed for interaction, and it just makes it so much more pleasant, so thank you. Anyway, you're going to hear us talk about things with excitement, and the reason we're going to be talking about it is that we happen to be excited about what we're doing. So when you look at it, you're going to hear what it is we're after. We're going to talk with you about our program. We're going to have plenty of time for you to ask questions. We'll do our best to get you some good answers. Scott, I see you're joining us. If you are at a place where you can turn your camera on, we really like talking with people. So
This is Scott Jordan. He is a current D2 rising D3.
there he is. Thank you.
Also,
And he was just in my office a few minutes ago. And just to let you know, he wasn't getting yelled at, so he was in good shape. So good questions. All right, let me tell you a little bit about us. First thing, I want you to take a look at the picture. Can you see the picture on the screen? What do you see? That's not rhetorical. I'm actually asking for comments. You can unmute your mics at any time. That's fine. What do you see?
I see shingles.
Shingles. Okay. What else can you tell me about those shingles?
They're not very pretty.
Okay. Do they all look alike? No, they're all different. This is a picture taken by our dean in Japan when he was there a couple of years ago. And what I like about this is that each one of those shingles or tiles is different. Each one of them very different. But what do they do as a group? It's not a trick question. They create a roof. Okay, what I'm looking for there is when we look at the shingles that are there, the tiles, when you look at each one has individual differences, but when they work together, essentially they create a roof. And the reason I'm bringing this to you is I want you to understand something at the very beginning about Roseman. We do everything in teams here, everything. Our academic program is done in teams. Our breakout sessions, study sessions are done in teams. Our clinic is done in teams. Even simulation clinic is in teams. So is research, so is community service. So are our student organizations. So when we look at applicants to our program, what we want to see are the individual differences that you're going to bring to our program, to our patients, to our communities, that will enable you to be part of a team and provide even higher levels of person-centered care. So it's very important to us that when you're looking at your application, you do indeed talk about that. Let's go on, Annie. Annie, I assume that you're controlling the presentation. Okay, good. So here's a question I want you to, if you've got something to write down, I would like for you to write down a couple of things tonight. This is one of them. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, what would it be like for you to live and learn at Roseman? Give you a second to write that down. What would it be like for you to live and learn at Roseman? And you should substitute whatever name of the school is that you're looking at, because you really need to think about what it would be like to be there. Because essentially, when you're a dental school student, you're going to spend more time with our faculty, our staff, and your fellow students than you would a spouse if you were married. So what we want you to do is to really think about what would it be like for you to be here. Very important. We're going to start, next one. And the second thing that I want you to think about when you're creating your application is, what will you contribute to the program, the profession, and to patient care? Now, it goes back to what I was saying initially, that we're looking for individual differences. And we want to know what you're going to bring to the program, to the profession, to patient care. So those are the first two starting questions. And I will tell you, there's another slide that if you click, Annie, I always like to begin with the end in mind. And it has to do with work that I did with a guy named Stephen Covey, who wrote a very good book called, actually wrote a whole series of them, called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The second one of which is begin with the end in mind. And I thought you all might enjoy seeing what some of our students did when they got the regalia last week. They went out to several national parks and took pictures of themselves in regalia in the parks. So what I want you to have firmly in your mind is there is a point at which you will graduate from a dental program. If you master the foundation materials essential for success in dental school, do a good job with your application and your interviews, that could be you in a few years. So we're excited about that. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about culture. You know, I know with all of you being part of the Bronco culture, you understand that there is a way that each university sees itself, and each program within a university sees itself as well. And we're no different in that respect, but it goes back to the idea that you're going to be spending a lot of time with us. So what we want to do is make sure that you understand the culture of our institution. It is very unusual. It is very different. We have a culture we're going to talk a little bit more about in a moment that's called lifelong colleague culture. It's based upon implementing the principles and concepts of emotional intelligence. And we're going to talk about what that means. So we really want you to understand what our culture is about. But if you look at the subtitle on that slide, it says, Transforming the Future of Healthcare for Our Patients. And that is indeed what we are doing. And you're going to, I think, find some of the ideas really exciting. Next slide. So who are we? And, you know, I would expect that if I asked you who Broncos are, you'd be able to tell me a bit about the culture at Boise State. And this is no different. Well, for us at the College of Dental Medicine, we are a community based on an enduring culture of lifelong colleagues. By the way, I'm not looking out the window. When I look to my right, I'm trying to read the other screen, which was where the script is. So we have an enduring culture of lifelong colleagues. That means it's perpetuating. And there's a way by which we perpetuate that culture. We're going to talk about it. Because in any institution, culture evolves, whether it's intended or not. And for us, we wanted to reflect what we believe are the values of our program. We work together in teams. I already mentioned that we do everything in teams. Next one. Our individual difference contributes to the class and to person-centered care. And I think you're getting that sense. So how do we go about creating this enduring culture? We're going to hit that in just a moment. But first, I want you to know something, and that is everything we do is designed to provide patient care. So if you look at studying biochemistry as an example, we really aren't studying biochemistry to study biochemistry. We're studying it because you're going to apply it in patient care. So when you have the attitude starting at the beginning that everything you do here is designed to be implemented in patient care, if it's important enough to teach, it's important enough to learn because it's going to be applied in patient care. And that is something I want you to really understand about our program. Go ahead. So we have a way of creating and maintaining this culture of lifelong colleagues, and it's based around 3 commitments. And basically what I want you to understand is when I describe these commitments, this is not about something that we put in a statement and put it up on a wall and everybody walks past it every day and never reads it. This is something we make real in every interaction we have with each other. And Aaron, I was thinking about when you were here on a Saturday, you got a chance to see some of the culture of the school with the number of students and faculty that showed up because they wanted to share with you and the other advisors what it is we were about. Next slide. So let's talk about the 3 parts of these. The first one is lifelong colleague. And what lifelong colleague means is that we make each and every interaction reflect a sincere desire to develop each other as lifelong colleagues. Now, you know, that sounds interesting, but I'm going to challenge you to think about that over the next several days. What would it be like for you to live and learn in a place where all of the other members of your class, the other members of the other classes, the faculty, the staff, everybody is making their interactions reflect a desire to develop each other as lifelong colleagues? If they make a commitment and keep that, what would it be like for you to be in that environment? It's a very important question. The second one is our honor code. It's very simple. I will not lie, steal, cheat, disrespect others, nor tolerate among us anyone who does. We have had very few disciplinary actions over the last, what has it been, 11 years, Chris, I think? 11 years. We've had very few because our folks don't lie, steal, cheat, disrespect others. We have an occasional squabble. That's normal. in any family, but what we do is we resolve it as lifelong colleagues. And if they end up in my office, I'm very likely to ask them to tell me what they're doing at the current moment is developing the other person as a colleague. And what happens is we start seeing them change their approach to the problem and find solutions that work. The other thing is, if you think about being a colleague, colleagues don't lie to each other. They don't steal from each other. They don't cheat. That's not part of our culture. And we're going to talk about part of the way that we have made that happen is by nearly eliminating competition. That may sound strange to you because I know you've heard about a lot of other programs where people compete. Ours is not one of them. And the final commitment is I commit to help you become the best you can be at what you do. Now, the key thing for us here is to understand that in a competitive model, somebody loses because somebody gets ahead, somebody doesn't. But the real losers in that are your future patients because they're counting on you mastering the material. What would happen if you're in an environment where you commit to help others as they do you to become the best you can be at what you're doing? It puts a different slant on dental education that is very much not competitive. Dr. Monk teaches our very first course. We believe so highly in this. It's the first course in our curriculum, which is on ethics and professionalism and deals with this as well as emotional intelligence. Chris, do you want to comment a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to, Bill. Thank you. One of the things I would just want everybody to understand, and I go back to Bill, what you were talking about of the competitive nature of so many institutions. And I think if I use kind of a visual for you to think about this, a lot of times it's just ladders and everybody's trying to climb up the ladder to get to the top. And it's not uncommon that if someone is gaining on somebody, they sort of step on the fingers of the person below them to kind of slow their progress down. Here at Roseman University, what we really do is it's more like we are all on the same plane and we hold hands and we just move each other forward. And once in a while, someone will stumble and fall. And we don't stop and point fingers at them and laugh or mock or make fun of them, but rather we pick them up and dust them off and we lock arms again and we move forward. That really is the environment that we have created at Roseman University. So truly, every interaction is a desire to develop those with whom we associate. Talking about the ethics courses, of course, we talk about ethics and ethical behavior. We talk about the American Dental Association's principles of ethics and the code of professional conduct. Those are expectations that the profession gives us of standards that we have to meet as we live. So we certainly study those, but we implement or talk about the how do we accomplish those things is through the principles of emotional intelligence. And just briefly, we talk about self-awareness, understanding your limitations and boundaries and your triggers and all those kinds of things. And then self-management of controlling your emotions and using them appropriately. The third area that we talk about is social awareness, and that is just being aware that other people have feelings as well. And they have desires and aspirations. And if we're aware of that, we can a lot of times then come together and work on those same things. Then the fourth category is relationship management, which is just how we get along with one another. And truly, if you think about a doctor-patient relationship, it is the principles of emotional intelligence that really help outstanding clinicians become near and dear to the hearts of their patients. That's what we try to accomplish in our ethics courses and then in all the courses as we move forward through our curriculum.
So what we want you to understand is who we are, because if you decide to come here, we're going to expect you to become part of our family and that you will be behaving according to the lifelong colleague commitment, the honor code commitment, and the commitment to each other. And the way you do so is through emotional intelligence. And we're going to continue to help people develop those skills throughout the program. We actually evaluate on nearly a daily basis how our students are doing this, and we make suggestions on how to improve. And I think this is very important. I'll say one more thing about it, and then we're going to move on to disruptors. We had a student graduate from our program a few years ago, Jordan Saltz, and I know that several of you remember him on the call. And he was one of our white coat speakers that year as a student speaker. And he made the comment, he said in the commentary that Dr. Harmon spent 30 minutes of the program talking about commitments, integrity, and the importance of these things. And he said, I just assumed all places do that. And he said, nope, Roseman does it. And the reason is because that is central to how we create, maintain, and develop our culture is through those commitments. So I want you all to understand that. So on to disruptors. Interesting historical fact here. What we used to do on interview day was we would present a scenario to students and we'd interject a disruptor into the discussion. Little did we know how much of a disruptor we all were going to experience since last year. And if you think about the major disruptor worldwide, it's been COVID. And of course, it's been horrible. I don't want to tell anybody that it's been any less than that. The death toll, the illness toll, the limitations on all of our lives have been just awful. But in the process of having a disruptor, it also creates possibilities. And I want to talk with you, this Zoom call right now, most dental schools would never have thought of doing a Zoom call to talk with pre-dental students. And yet now it's become something that we can do and do well. So when I look at it, disruptors create possibility. Let's take a look at what I mean by that in terms of our curriculum. In the old days, meaning prior to this year, we used to have national board exams and they were in two parts, part one, part two. Part one dealt primarily with biomedical sciences, and normally you take the national exam on the biomedical sciences at the conclusion of the biomedical courses, usually at the end of the first year in a few schools, or definitely in the second year for the others. Then in the third and fourth years, when you were in clinic at the end of the, somewhere generally in the fourth year, you take part two, and it was more clinically focused. And if you look at our old curriculum, I'm going to show you what that meant. If you look at the green area, those are our biomedical sciences. So in the old days, when we used to test biomedical knowledge in part one of the national boards, since it was done in the first years, we had to front load the biomedical sciences. And I know all of you are excited that right after finishing up all your biomedical courses, you get to go in and take more in dental school. I know that's what you're living for. But the bottom line is, it was a reality forced on us by the national boards. Well, what happened is our dean was actually chair of the Commission on Dental Examinations. And what they did is a few years back, they started developing the integrated national board, where instead of having two parts, they're bringing it together so that you have one board that basically tests both of your ability to apply biomedical sciences to clinical situations. It makes a lot more sense. That hadn't happened now until the end of the third or the beginning of the fourth year. So what that disruptor created were possibilities, and the possibility was to change our curriculum. So if you look over on this part of the slide that says new curriculum, if you look at the green on the biomedical sciences again, you see now that they're more evenly distributed over 3 years because we don't have to front load them anymore. What does that give us an advantage of? We can start you in clinic on their first day in dental school. That's something most people want to start seeing patients. We think that's kind of important. Well, that disruptor created the possibility of moving forward. So if you look in the background of the old model, the old curriculum, at the blue, that's when you saw most of the clinical courses and patient care. But if you look at the new curriculum, you see how you're going to be in clinic starting at the very beginning. There are only about a half dozen, Rachel, I think the numbers of like a half dozen schools working on this out of the 60, where we realized that we could actually change our curriculum as a result of this disruptor. So now what's happening is, instead of having to wait to your third year, or maybe the end of the second year if you were lucky, to start seeing patients, you're now doing this starting on day one. And I'd ask you to think about, when do you want to start seeing patients? I mean, most people want us to get in to start seeing patients early. We've made that possible. And it was because of this huge disruptor called national boards that we're able to move a little differently. So what I want you to know that is that our curriculum allows us to get you into patient care early. It allows you to get involved with it. Let's say you're studying, and Dr. Novak knows far more about this than I am, and she may have better examples in a minute. But let's say you're seeing a patient who's diabetic and you're learning what some of the things are that are real for that patient, their concerns, you're hearing it from them. Then when you study diabetes, these things start coming together, where in the old model, you used to study diabetes without the patient care component of it. This is a huge change. Did I miss anything on that, Rachel? Okay, good. Well, that was my transition question to the classroom.
Okay, so we are going to talk about Roseman's 6-point mastery learning model, and Scott can tell you this is plastered all over our walls. This is how we set up education, and we're going to go through each of them briefly. But as we're talking about this, I want you to just be thinking about how the physical facility, so the actual physical structure of a building, can affect what happens inside of it. And one of those pieces is how we have redesigned the classroom. I just want to read each of these really quickly before we move on. So we're going to talk about classroom as teacher, block curriculum, active and collaborative learning, competency-based education, assessment learning, and early experiential learning. And Scott Kane and Scott Jordan, just so you know, when I get up to assessment, I'm going to have you guys tell a little bit, share about what your assessment experiences have kind of been like, what the team assessments like, what that whole process is like. So you can start thinking about that a little bit. You go on to the next slide, Annie. So if we look at Roseman's classroom, it's a totally different setup. I've taught at a lot of universities, and I'm always in a big lecture hall, kind of like up on a stage, far away from my students. But at Roseman, the classroom is designed in this hexagon shape. So I am only ever a few rows away from even the back row of students, and students are all looking at each other. And it creates this incredibly engaging experience where you can read the room better. As classmates, you can read the room. We have swiveling chairs. You will, both of the Scotts can attest to, I do lots of turn to your partner and explain something. And then during a class period, if you look at that top left-hand picture, you can see that surrounding the classroom, there's all these individual breakout rooms. So we could be in class talking about, talking about our skulls. And I'm up there and I'm telling you all these different structures on the skulls. Everyone has a skull in their hand. I can send you to the breakout. Everyone goes to their breakout group and we'll go and teach those structures of the skull. We'll come back together and maybe we'll talk about how the skull moves or different actions of the mandible. You go back out to those breakout rooms and you can teach that to your partner. So the classroom setup allows us to do a lot of things that you couldn't normally do in a classroom, which is really exciting as an educator. Scott, do you have any thoughts about what it's been like as a student to be in that? Actually, Scott Jordan, are you in a breakout right now?
Yeah, I'm currently in a breakout room right now.
You want to just turn your computer and show us what it looks like?
I have whiteboards all over the place where you can just write out your thoughts. And then just across the way, there is the classroom that has this, I guess, octagon shape. But it's really awesome that you're able to just turn to your partner immediately and have a complete conversation. You can't hide and like behind a post or anything. Like you embracing everything.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And those rooms that Scott's in right now, they have a big screen too, so you can hook your computer up to it if you're studying together and look at PowerPoints together. And those whiteboards, like during head and neck 1, those whiteboards are just covered with all the cranial nerves and all their pathways, and people come and go and can study in those rooms like Scott is right now. Like you can go and study in these classrooms. So it's a really nice setup.
I interject something there. Scott said something I think that's very important. As you're looking at our program and other programs, he made a comment that is just super, super, super important. He said, you can't hide out in this classroom complex. And there's a reason for that is we've known since the 1920s, when John Dewey first published on experiential learning, that it has been confirmed in hundreds of studies since, that adults learn best in an experiential format, where they are actually learning by doing. And this is very important because in a lecture hall, you can hide out. I've done it. So have most of everybody that I ever talk with has done that. But here, no, you can't hide out as easily. Basically, As Rachel pointed out, you're no more than 4 rows away from us at any point. We walk around the room, we engage people as we're doing it. We go into the breakout sessions. You're going to be actively involved during the day, which is very, very important.
All right, Annie, will you go into the next slide, please? So our next component is our block curriculum. So I know you've experienced these times where it's coming up on finals week and you've got like 5 or 6 or 10 finals that you're trying to prepare for. But at Roseman, everything's done in this block curriculum. So at the most, you'll have 1 clinical course and 1 didactic course at the same time. And so you have a final exam every few weeks instead of all this building up and a whole bunch of them hitting you at the same time, which I find as a teacher, it's really fantastic getting to teach that way. I assume as a student, Scott, do either of you have a thought about what it's been like learning in a block curriculum versus a normal traditional curriculum?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I actually enjoy the block curriculum so much more than I did like traditional classroom time in undergrad, because I was able to focus on one thing and become incredibly competent in that area. Whereas, I don't know, organic chemistry, it's comprised over 16 weeks. And then then they're going to ask me, what happened on week 2? And I don't remember, but I can focus everything in a shorter amount of time and really become competent in that area.
And you avoid the burnout, right, Scott? That's one thing I've noticed too. Like when you're in a long semester on class, sometimes towards the end, you're like, when is this class just going to end? I'm even enjoying it. I'm just overwhelmed. It's been going on too long. And this is like quick and fast, and then it's done. Scott Kane, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, same thing as Scott Jordan had said. It's nice because everything is just in one block and you don't have to worry about other classes. And I think the best thing is that everyone's in this one block. You're not worrying about other students, worrying about a different class. It's all focused at one time. And as he said, you get to really have a really competency-based learning about this one particular subject.
Fantastic. Annie, we move on to the next slide. This is just a slide of dental students having fun. This obviously was taken more than a year ago, back when we could be right next to each other. But this is in our near future again, all of this close-up gathering. Let me go on to the next one.
Greg, for a minute before you go on from that slide. Our student organizations have won nearly every honor, award, and recognition for which they've been qualified. They do an absolutely phenomenal job. The chapter that you see there is ASDA, and they've won the best chapter in the country twice in the last 6 years. I mean, this is an incredible place for people to get involved, to learn leadership, and really put it into practice to make a difference in people's lives.
Dr. Harmon, will you explain this next one, competency-based education? Or do you want me to do it?
I can do it.
Okay.
By the way, just so you know, when we're asking who wants to do this, we're all prepared to do every section. So it's kind of whoever gets it, we're doing it. There are 2 basic, and I'm speaking now as an educator, there are 2 basic ways that education takes place. One is normative, which you know very well, and the other is competency-based, which is more recent in many respects, and in some others not so recent. Normative is what people are used to, where people get graded on the A, B, C, D, E, or F scale. It's where we assign grades. And I used to do this, by the way, for years when I was at Ohio State, at Baylor, Texas A&M, UNLV, and other places. I really thought I knew what I was doing with grades. I'm not so sure about those anymore. And I can give you an example. When I was at Texas A&M, one of our professors who was new didn't quite understand how we turn grades in. And they came to my office as student dean. And when they came in on a 100-point scale, the professor's highest score in the class was 49. As you might expect, I was on the staircase quickly going down to his office saying, does that mean the entire class has failed? He said, no, they know it well enough. He said, I'll just apply a curve and I'll move them up to the 100 and just about everybody will pass the course. And I remember looking at him, I said, if the highest score was 49 in the class, how do you know if they've actually mastered the material? He didn't really have an answer for that. And I will tell you, I used to believe that my grades actually reflected mastery. I now understand that perhaps I was overly optimistic. So what we've moved to is away from the A, B, C, D, E, or F grades to what's called competency-based. And I'll explain what that means. Is competency means that the faculty specifies what you need to know as a result of being in the course. That may sound strange, but it's legitimate. They also specify a performance level for what they expect you to achieve. So essentially, competency-based has replaced the grading by saying either you're competent or not. Let me give you an example. Annie, would you move to the next slide? A good example is your driver's test. I assume all of you have driver's licenses. Nod your heads yes, because I won't have you on mute. When you took your driver's test, I doubt that if you got an 80 on it, they gave you your driver's license. They also didn't say, oh, well, 80 is close enough. You can drive on the side streets, just not on the highways. You either had to pass it at the specified performance level to get a license, or you retook it in some way. And this is an important way to think about competency. Either you are competent or not yet competent. And that three-letter word yet is very important. You're either competent or not yet competent. And we're going to talk about how we get you to that level. Do you want me to hit the performance level too before we shock them? Okay, good. All right, so you're all sitting down. That's good. I always like to make sure people are not in a place where they might faint when we show you the next slide, and that is what performance level is required. Well, you already know that I don't think 49 out of 100 is a good score. So we have a performance level. Next slide, please. And it's basically, we have a pass, no pass system. What pass means is that you're ready to move on. What no pass means is you're not quite ready yet. What's the level? You have to hit 90%. If somebody has an 89%, are they failing? The answer is no. And that's why we're not a pass-fail school. If you've got an 89, you haven't yet passed, and we're going to do some things to get you up to that level. But it's important to understand that the concept here is we want you at that A level, basically, of 90% or higher, because your patients are depending on you knowing the material to provide the best and most appropriate treatment to them. So if you're like a lot of people, you remember back at the very beginning of the presentation, I showed you people in their regalia out enjoying Utah. There's a reason why I showed you that, is that our students do attain that level and they do graduate. The question is how, and Professor Novak's going to explain that.
All right. So we're going to talk about our assessment model, which is unusual, and I love it. I think it is fantastic. Will you go on to the next slide here, Annie? So you've all been in classes where you have taken a final exam. All of a sudden, the semester's over. You're wondering what score you got. You click refresh, refresh, refresh. Eventually, your score shows up online. You're happy or sad, whatever, but you're done, right? You're just done with that course. It's time to move on. And you never get to interact with the faculty again. You never really talk about your final exam or what you did right or what you did wrong. You just kind of are done and move on. Well, at Roseman, we believe that assessment is a really important part of the actual learning process. So for one, you're going to have lots of frequent ungraded quizzes. So right now, Scott Kane is in my Head and Neck 2 course. Every single day, we start with a quiz over the previous material. It's not graded. There's no anxiety associated with it, but it's a way for the student and for me to see how individuals are doing. What subjects are people doing well with? Was there a common misunderstanding, something I can clarify? And then every 2 or 3 weeks, there'll be the end of a block, and you will take an assessment, which will look similar to assessments you've taken thousands of times as an undergrad. So you'll take an individual assessment. Here's where it gets really different. Immediately after you're done with that assessment, instead of just going home and waiting for those grades to show up, you immediately will go and meet with your assigned team, and you get to go through that exact same assessment again. So you get to find out what you did wrong immediately, which is so nice for instant gratification, right? Instead of just going home and wondering what the answer was to a certain question, you find out moments later. And you are encouraged to talk to your teams. You get to talk about it and you can help each other. Maybe Scott Jordan knows the answer to 25 and Scott Kane knows the answer to 26, and they can help each other learn that material and help each other catch up. That's the dream. That's the idea, that the actual, you walk away from the assessment knowing more than you did going in to the assessment. And then immediately after that, so same day, right after that, the faculty members then come in and join the class and go through that exact same assessment with the entire group. So you can find out what the faculty member was thinking, you can ask questions, you can get clarification. So by this point in the day, you've taken assessment by yourself, a team assessment, and then this faculty discussion. If on the team assessment that your team as a whole did really well on it, you actually get 5% added to your individual assessment score. So we really strongly believe in not leaving any team member behind, that it's all about helping each other learn. So instead of Scott Kane writing down his awesome mnemonics and all of his pathways of nerves and then hiding it from Scott Jordan, we're encouraging them to share them with each other, help each other, share your notes, share your flashcards, share your mnemonics. You're not in competition with each other. Let's help everybody. Let's link arms and help everybody learn the material, help everyone make it through. Guaranteed there's going to be certain blocks that you're better at and other blocks that you struggle with. And it's going to be different for every student depending on their background, what sort of courses they've taken. So this kind of allows us to realize that the team brings in all sorts of benefits for every single individual within that group. So at this point, you either passed, you got a 90%, or you didn't pass, you didn't get a 90% yet. So then we have an opportunity for you to meet with just that little group of people who maybe didn't pass, to interact with a faculty member and fine tune those little places where you had a misunderstanding, and understand the material better, master that material, and then take a new assessment to test your understanding. At that point, you either pass or don't pass. And you'll have a third opportunity during, at the end of a term, to meet with the faculty and again, go over the material, whichever portions that you're struggling with. At this point, if you don't pass, then you will repeat the block or meet with the deans to find some other strategy. I've never had it happen. I've been teaching all the anatomy courses at the university since the beginning, and I've never had it happen. It just hasn't gone to that point yet. And one thing that's really important to understand is this process of reassessing and remediating is not shameful, it's not embarrassing, it's not some sort of strike against you. It's built in, it's part of our educational plan to be able to just help make sure that everyone's up to the same level of understanding before forcing you to move on into another area. So it's really all of it positive, none of it shameful, all hopefully feels really good. Scott Jordan and Scott Kane, can you share have you had some experiences with this where you have felt this whole assessment model benefit your education?
Yeah, I'll go first. So what happened, I'll give an example. So it was actually Dr. Novak's course for head and neck 1. My kiddo had to go to the emergency room, so I actually ended up missing some class. Unfortunately, I did not pass my first time. I got an 88 in the class, and I have to get 90. And so unfortunately, I didn't make it. And so on the slides, if you can see the guided study time, what's neat is Professor Novak was able to come and meet with me and say, this is where you messed up, or this is what needs to be improved. And then the next exam, you can just crush it, completely just pass the class and have no issues at all. And that's exactly what happened, is Professor Novak came and helped me out, was able to guide me through anything I needed to see better, and I passed the course. So, and that's the purpose. And you might think 90% is, I don't know, hard to obtain, but it's very doable. And guess what? If you don't have it happen, there's also always going to be a faculty member there to help you along the way.
Hey, Scott, do you remember what you got on your reassessment?
Oh, it was probably a 98. I mean, I killed it. So
Okay, I want to make a point here before we go to the other Scott here in a second. So you're now at a interview for a postdoctoral residency program, and you're helping a program director understand how our system works. So Scott Jordan goes in and he says, yeah, I had this course with Professor Novak when it was head and neck anatomy. And when I took my first assessment, I only got an 88. Parentheses. What the program director is thinking is, 88, that's a good score. What's wrong with an 88? And then Scott goes on and he says, what I did is I met with her, I went over the material I didn't know. And then what happened is I reassessed and I came back with, you said a 98 or
Yeah.
something in that grade. What do you think the program director is sitting there thinking about your academic preparation? The answer is they're super impressed. And it's part of the reason why we have one of the highest rates of acceptance into postdoctoral programs in the country. Scott Kane.
Yeah, I would just like to talk about how it's all about the team portion. When we take this test and when we're getting ready to take this test, I'm constantly studying with my classmates and we meet up almost daily on the weekends and we have little study groups. And so when it comes time to take the test and you do take the individual first and then you move on to your team, it really helps to take the team and talk about each question and kind of like break it down and maybe one of your teammates will help explain a certain concept that you just happen to miss. And it is 90% to pass, but at the same time, that gives you some wiggle room. And when your team scores above a certain percentage and you get those extra points back, you're not worried at all almost at that point. And so it's really the team assessment's all about just learning some concepts or just solidifying those concepts. And it's a huge classroom thing too. We have a group me where we will text each other if someone was happened to not pass. They'll be like, hey, I'll give you my study guide. I can come over this weekend. We can come together and we can make sure that everyone gets through. And so far, I think everyone's been doing really well in my class just because we do learn together as a team.
You see, that's the beauty of the no pass system, is when we establish a competency and we get rid of grades, we also get rid of competition, because no longer are people trying to compete for a grade, they're helping each other become competent. And Scott, you gave me a perfect opening to make one other comment. Courtney, Amy, Shannon, are any of you psych majors by any chance? Okay, we're going to turn you into one here in a minute. And that is, there's an old phrase in psychology of be careful what you reinforce, you're going to get more of it. And if you think about that, yeah, be careful what you reinforce, you're going to get more of it. So when we look back to what Professor Novak was talking about with the team points, we're reinforcing working in teams. We remove grades, so we're reinforcing collaboration to become the best we can be, not who can be first in a rank list, because we don't rank our students either. So that's kind of important. Be careful what you reinforce, you're going to get more of it. Also describes our culture, where the more we behave like lifelong colleagues, abiding by an honor code and helping each other become the best we can be, the more we see that in every day. I'm done with that.
Bill, can I just, or Rachel, can I just make a comment really quickly? This is one of the grand things about Roseman University is what we've just been talking about, but I want to bring it back to the point of person-centered care. What's the advantage of learning the material at 98% versus 72%? You're going to be treating patients. And I think patients' confidence and your own confidence is going to be pretty high if you know that you truly have mastered the material and you are truly competent, as opposed to, well, I got a 72. I don't know 28% of the material, but it's good enough to move on. So just want to make that point. It all comes back to the patients that we provide care for.
I'll give you one more story on that from back when I was at one of my prior schools, Texas A&M. We had this wonderful oral surgeon, I think, Chris, you may know him, Roger Alexander, who taught medical emergencies. And his course was up it was a 1 or 2 hour course and was up against 16 or 18 other hours of courses in things like anatomy, physiology, really high ticket credit hour courses. So the students, dental students are not stupid, by the way. Just to make that point, they're able to figure out the math on this pretty quickly. And they figured out that if they didn't quite have enough time to study everything, a 2 hour course would likely not get them kicked out of dental school or having to repeat the year, whereas one of the other ones might. So they put their study time in on those other courses. We had a lot of people who got D's and F's in medical emergencies, which is what Roger taught. And what I'd say to you is I usually ask people, do you think the D or the F is the worst grade? And the answer is not the F, it's the D, because it's a passing grade, which means people actually pass the course with a D. Okay, now I'm a patient, and this goes back to what Dr. Monk was just saying. I'm now your patient, and you've got a D in medical emergencies. I'm in your chair, and I have a heart attack, a seizure, or a stroke. How good am I feeling about you having a 72 in a course? You see the point? This has to do with mastery. It has to do with competency, not so much the grade itself. We want you at that level of performance.
Annie, will you go on to the next slide? This is the 6th of our 6-point mastery learning model. Dr. Monk, will you talk just briefly about early experiential learning?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. Yeah, the whole point here, this goes back to the traditional model where, like when I went to dental school, for 1.5 years, we were in classrooms and then finally got to start seeing patients. So in the clinical environment, now, as Dr. Harmon referred to, very early on, that first week of dental school, we have patients, we have our students start to interact with patients at a level that they can handle. We're not expecting them to go in and do things that they don't know how to do, but they certainly can, do some things to help. So that's the clinical side of it. The didactic or classroom side of it is with these little breakout sessions, and Dr. Novak, held up the skull and showed it. We are really getting this correlation between the sciences and patient care implemented very, very early. In fact, one quick story about Dr. Novak. I am an oral surgeon. Dr. Novak, in teaching the anatomy course, came to me and said, hey, can you help me understand from a dentist's perspective, why does diabetes matter in dental care, or whatever the malady might be? So we went through a whole list of systems diseases and related it to why a dentist needs to know that. So now that as she's teaching those courses, she can connect the why does it matter to dentistry very early on in the didactic environment rather than waiting for later on. So the early experiential learning is a key portion of our 6-point mastery learning model.
Wonderful. Hey, Annie, we move on to the next slide. And actually, do you want to take just a minute? So will you raise your hand if you are a student at Boise State who's considering going to dental school? So Amy and Courtney. Amy and Courtney, do you have any thoughts about the 6-point mastery learning model? Like what stuck out to you? What spoke to your heart as you were hearing this? What sounds like, wow, I'd like to learn that way? Anything stuck out to you?
I think something, oh, sorry, Amy.
No, you can go ahead. You can go first.
Okay. I was just gonna say that I think I struggle with I normally think that I know the information, but I'll question if I'm competent in it. Like if I had to go do it again, that's something that's an anxiety in my head with school. So I really liked the structure of the class to make you be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I know that information. So I
love that. Yes. Amy, what are your thoughts?
I would say the thing that stood out to me the most was that how you guys mentioned that there's no competition. I just think that really helps me learn better, knowing that you're working as a team and able to collaborate with more people.
Wonderful. And it really does happen. It was fun listening to both Scots talk about their experiences, but this idea of sharing notes and sharing slides and sharing mnemonics, it really happens. It's not just something we talk about, it really happens for every block, which is exciting. Okay, Dr. Harmon, you're up.
Well, what it has to do with everything that you've heard, I'm going to put into a psychological concept for a moment. Annie, if you get the next slide, please. We've talked, actually, next one after that. That was actually our ASDA group when they won the award. In Gestalt psychology, one of the favorite phrases is the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And that's something I would encourage you to think about as you think about our presentation this evening and really reflect on what it is we've talked about. So we have these 3 commitments. We know that by making and keeping those 3 commitments, we create a culture. And now that you've heard about the way our teams function, I think you can understand now how the importance of those 3 commitments. If we treat each other to develop each other as colleagues, if we all agree to abide by an honor code, and if we all help each other become the best we can be, it now creates that context where those teams can be very effective. And you mentioned a moment ago that you like the idea of getting rid of the competition. It's made possible by the other part of the model. So when you look at all of these things going together, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. One more example. If you look at our block curriculum, it only works if you have adjacent classrooms. Because if you try to do this in an auditorium, I'm sorry, but 2 straight weeks of, I'm sorry, but if you're listening to 2 straight weeks of lecture only in anatomy, and it's going to get to be a little bit much. But if you're able to have this ebb and flow between the large group, the small group, you take it to the next level, you do something else to master it. What it does is it keeps you actively involved. So we like to say that all of these elements go together. The commitments, all the elements of the 6-point mastery model go together to create a whole that is greater than the sum of any of its parts. And of course, as you heard several of us speak about, we do this to be able to provide compassionate, effective, and efficient person-centered care. And that's very important. So we're kind of there. I'm going to skip the next slide, Annie. If you skip that. We're back to another skiing thing. I don't quite understand this, but last year, Madison, who was one of our graduates last year, we couldn't have an in-person graduation because it happened because of the pandemic. So she took her regalia out on one of the ski slopes, and I thought that was kind of a fun picture. So with that, what questions do you have that you wanted to ask us about anything?
You don't ask them, folks. Remember, Erin always asks them if you don't. So
I have a question. So what year do specialties come into play? Or like, do you guys, is there like how does that go?
You mean when do you apply to specialties, or when do you start doing specialties?
Both.
Okay, I'll let Dr. Monk answer the one about when specialty care comes into play.
Thank you. The first thing I would say to you, Amy, is that because we are a team that provides care to a patient pool, if you will, you are exposed to the specialties right from the very, very beginning. You will see patients that have periodontal disease who, then the team focuses on that, or parts of the team do. Or there's a tooth needs to have a wisdom tooth removed. So you're exposed to it right away, and it's just part of the whole curriculum, as opposed to, just so you know, we don't have separate departments for endo and perio and oral surgery and all that. It's all part of the team concept. And then to answer the question as to when, typically, I'm going to talk about oral surgery specifically, but the principle applies. I encourage students to just enjoy their first year. They might have something that they think they want to specialize in, and that's great. Just enjoy every part of your education, especially that first year. And then as you get exposed to these different specialties, you're going to kind of be drawn to one if you want to do that. Now, if it's surgery, for example, in your second year and going into your third year is when you will want to start studying for the exams, and you will perhaps want to start doing some shadowing, either in school or at private practices and those kinds of things. And then the beginning of your fourth year is when your application goes in, and then oral surgery, the match date is usually around the 22nd of January of your D4 year. So Amy, did that answer your question, or do you have follow-up questions I can answer along those lines?
That was good. Thank you.
And
You're
would you
most
like to
welcome.
know a secret for how to apply to residencies and how to get a job?
I would.
I had a feeling you might. This is what I teach the dental students. Annie, can we go back to the prior slide that I skipped? Because I had a feeling it was going to be more appropriate here. I don't know if we can. Nope, there she is. Okay. All right. You want to begin at dental school, and for that matter, what you're doing right now at Boise State, you want to begin with the end in mind. And the end in mind is either you're going to go into private practice or you're going to go into specialty. Either way, you need to prepare yourself in a way that you can be very effective with your applications, either for jobs, residencies, or whatever it might be. Dr. Monk and I are two of the deans who write the letters for our students to hopefully get them in for an interview. And we do that with a lot of information. But I will tell you the number one thing I see not only for specialty and employment interviews, but also on your applications to dental school. And I've seen a few of them. I think it's somewhere over 50,000 now at this point over the years. The number one problem in it is people don't give us good stories. When they do, they get interviewed. When they don't, they likely won't get it. So the question is, where do you come up with these stories to tell us, and what are we looking for? What we're looking for in the stories are examples of how you have done something, preferably with other people, that matches with what we want to see in our dental students and future practitioners. The problem is that we all, most of us at least, I don't know, some of you may have photographic memories, I don't. So if I were to ask you what three things happened of significance on February 12th, how many of you could give me three things without a problem? Yeah, exactly. That's the problem, is we need a way to capture things contemporaneously at the time that allow us to use it later in a way. So here's my suggestion to you. I want you to get two journals, and you're going to, the one you will update frequently, the other one may last you the entire time through dental school, we'll see. And here's what you're going to do. In the first journal, I recommend at the end of the day, or if you can do it at the time something happens, jot down just enough words that it can remind you of something of significance that happened. It could be something that happened in clinic, it could be something in class, you learned something about working on a team, you had a relationship issue that you resolved, whatever it might be, just jot it down. Date and number those three entries, okay? Then what the literature is telling us in positive psychology is that if you add a statement of gratitude to it, it helps you ground yourself. It reduces stress. It helps you put things in perspective. And it also just generally improves mental health. So every day, if you start thinking about doing three entries of something of significance that happened, by the way, if there are 4 or 5, fine, that's good. But I want you to get at least 3 down. Just jot them down. Date and number them. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. Now let's do the math before I get to the other comment. If you do 3 a day, okay, I'm going to test your math ability. I think math is one of the strong points of Boise State, as I remember. If you take 3 a day and you multiply it times 7 days a week, how many stories do you have at the end of the week? That's a question for a response. Thank you. 21. If you do that 50 weeks out of the year, how many do you have at the end of a year? 50 times 20 is, oh, I love the eyes going up on everybody, 1,000, okay? Now let's say you do that for the next 3 or 4 years. You've got 3,000 or 4,000 stories put together that you could choose from to find the ones that best match what you're likely to be asked about at the interviews. There's no way you're going to remember them if you don't jot them down. Now here's the second part, and this is the second journal. The first journal, as I said, is where you make your daily entries, 3 at minimum, plus a statement of gratitude. You're going to build up hundreds to thousands of stories over the next couple of years. Now, the second journal is organized a little differently. This is where you're going to put in themes that are important to you or to the program. So let me give you an example. I might reserve a couple of pages for teams. You heard us say several times tonight, we do everything in teams. So when you have an experience that you want to talk about being in a team, whether it's a good experience or a not so good experience or something that evolved out of the process, I'd like to have you put that on the team page. We talked about 3 commitments, the underlying integrity and ethics. There might be a section on there on integrity and ethics. There might be something in there that deals with other things, but the point is your second journal has these areas of topics. Now, back to the first journal. You make the article tonight, which I'm going to encourage you to start your journal tonight if you don't already do it, is you're going to put down something that you learned from tonight's seminar. And then what I want you to think about is what theme does that link with? So if you heard something tonight about working in teams, you note something on that daily entry, you've dated it and number, take the date and number only over to the theme page. You don't need to rewrite it again. That's a waste of time. So over a period of months, you're going to see the number of things under the team, under the integrity, under the communication, whatever the themes are that you believe to be most important. Each one of them is going to start to be an index to those particular things. When you start preparing for your materials to apply to dental school and later for either residency, employment, or employment after residency, whichever order you're going in, you then go and you say, I know this program really wants to know information about how I improved my performance by working in a team. Let's see what all my listings are. And then you go back and it reminds you of everything you've talked about in teams or integrity or any of the other themes that you believe important. And I think that Aaron probably can give you some good guidance on some of the things that dental schools look for in applicants. So when we look at that, by journaling journal one, by the way, you're going to run out of room. You're going to replace, you're going to add another journal at that point. But hopefully journal 2 will last you for a period of time. Now, one other tip to the wise, if you're doing a written journal, when you make an entry, take a picture of it with your cell phone. Because if something happens to the journal, I don't want you to lose all the information. The literature tells us at this point in positive psychology that doing a written entry is more effective than doing it electronically. They don't know why. All they know is that the people they're following who do written entries tend to gain more from the journals than those who do the electronic. So that's what I recommend. So does that give you a tip for how to prepare for dental school? So if you start on this now, you know that you're going to get asked the question if you come to Roseman for an interview. We're going to ask you about how did you improve your performance on as a member of a team? We're probably going to ask you, how did you improve someone else's performance? Lifelong colleague. You might have different words to use in your experience, but as an example there, we're liable to ask you about what have you done to develop someone else as a colleague? But we're also going to ask, what has someone else done to develop you as a colleague? And that also ties into the gratitude statement, because if you tell them, gee, I really appreciate that you did this to help me develop, it builds better relationships, it builds a network. There are all sorts of things that come out of it. So I will tell you that if you start keeping a journal in the way that I'm describing it, you will have an abundance of good stories to tell when you go to an interview. And as you start preparing for the interview, as you start going through those journal entries, you will remind yourself of things. And when you get into the interview, you'll find yourself, it may be under team, but it also might apply to something else that we're asking about. That makes sense? So that will solve the number one problem that I see of not enough stories that involve people. And that's what we want to hear about. Other questions? By the way, I usually go to bed around 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11 at the latest. So I need to end by that time, but I'm yours until then. So ask me whatever you need.
Hey, Bill, can I jump in for a sec?
Yep.
Amy, you asked a really good question, and I just for you, do you have a sense of a specialty that you're looking at, that you're interested in at this point?
Right now I'm interested in pediatrics, but it's just like a thought. I'm not really solid on it.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's to have a thought, and then it'll develop as time goes on. just two other things I was just going to mention. One is one of the things that Dr. Harmon does regularly throughout your time at Roseman is he conducts these seminars that are called Road to Residency. And it's just every now and then, those who want to go into graduate programs get together and counsel together. Where are you? What can you do to strengthen your application? So there is that along the way. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is that I think the national average for dental students getting into a graduate programs is somewhere around 66, 67% nationally. And Roseman University, we are right at the 88 to 90% of our students that apply get into residencies. So a significant difference. But I think that's multifaceted. One is we make sure our students are competent, they know the material. But number two, Dr. Harmon teaches how to interview and how to present your best self forward. And I think that part of that also is introducing emotional intelligence and how to communicate with people on an adult level. It doesn't do any good to be number one in your class, but you don't know how to have a conversation with someone. So we really try to hit all of those areas.
Another thing in the journal that's so useful is you're learning how techniques. I'm thinking self-management as the strategy right now. As you get a I would make, by the way, each of those areas of each of the four areas of emotional intelligence a page in that second journal. As you see something in yourself that indicates that your self-management is improved, if Erin tells you that you're doing better on something, go write it down. This is very important because I may ask you in an interview, tell me how your ability to manage yourself has improved over the last 4 years. That could be a very important question. And if I'm a residency director, which Dr. Monk has been, and I used to teach in residencies quite a bit, we were very interested in their emotional intelligence because it predicts performance at a level that just is incredible. So when I look at those journal entries, I'd have a page each for each of the four areas of emotional intelligence. By the way, if you need to review those, go online, type in emotional intelligence, type in the name Daniel Goleman, Goleman, and it will bring up a summary for it, and it will let you really take a look at some of those categories. So if you looked at what we've already talked about tonight, we've talked about team, we've talked about commitments, integrity, like developing other people. You've got a bunch of different things that you can use as theme pages already, to which I would add things that are of particular interest to you. If the category is similar to one of the others, don't make a separate one, just kind of add it in there. That's good. Now, another tip that I want our students in particular to hear is that when you hear people coming back from interviews and they say, here's the question I was asked, you put it in your journal again under that thing. So if a residency director says, you know, one of the major things that concerns me is I want to be sure that we have each other's backs. If somebody's out for some reason, I don't have to worry about another member of the team coming in. Bingo, in your brain, you think team, and on the team page, you put that question. So you start adding that to everything else that's going along. Yeah, I'm seeing you. That's clicking in with you. I see it.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure Amy and Courtney will probably say that they've at least heard me say it once that they should be journaling and writing down their experiences.
Yeah.
At least once. But apparently I failed the other two who are in the room because they don't remember me saying that ever.
Don't worry, I got your back on that. I'm getting after it.
It does happen though. I'm sure Amy's heard me say it at least once. All right, I have some questions for the Scotts. I would like to know from both of you, what's the best part about being a dental student and what's the best part about Roseman?
You want to go first? I got it. Okay. So the best part of being a dental student is I've been able to see patients early on, treat patients and attend to their needs. So I could list countless of patients who have come to me with pain or questions, and I'm able to address their questions or pain and help them in any way they need help with. There's a lot of things I genuinely love about Roseman. And a lot of it, I mean, I'm pursuing becoming a specialist in oral surgery, so just like Dr. Monk. And so I've had just unique opportunities. We have excellent faculty at the school. They're able to help you and really guide you. And then also students. I just had a student who got into the Mayo Clinic this last year. He just left the school. And he was able to pretty much mentor me through the process of, you know, you should study like this for the exams, and you should apply at this time, and you should, you know, go an extern at this program because it's really good for this, and those sort of things. So the family lifestyle here at Roseman and just the opportunities, I don't know where I could get these anywhere else. I have the time to study and the opportunities to progress.
And I think my favorite part about Roseman is, since we are in this one block, one class schedule, it leaves available time after school. And if you have friends that are interested in dental or medical schools, once they get into their programs, you're going to find that their lives are busy and they don't have time for almost anything besides studying. I've had friends that have to wake up and study. They have to go study before bed. They're studying all day long because it's just so heavy on their courses. Since we're able to do just one block, one course at a time, I'm able to come home and I can just relax. I can hang out with my dog. I can eat food, you know, watch Netflix. I have time to be myself and just start the next day fresh again. And I think that's, for your mental health, it's extremely important. My anxiety is extremely low at the school. Like Scott, I'm also trying for a specialty, so I have time to study for these tests. You just have a whole separate life outside of school when you go to Roseman, and that's extremely important. So that's probably my favorite part.
You know, it's interesting that I hear you say that. I want to make a point that the reason our students are able to lead a balanced lifestyle has to do with the efficiency of our model. And you heard me mention this earlier, and Professor Novak also mentioned it. And now that is, when we're going through the day, now is the time to learn. So when we look at that going back and forth between the large and the small group, integrating with clinic, throughout the day, you are integrating that knowledge. In other schools I've been associated with, you've got all these courses that you have to do. You go home at night to try to sort out your notes. You try to figure out what's important. And what you're doing is it's not efficient. So when I look at the efficiency of our learning model, it allows people to have a life. Second comment, have you heard of the guy named Art Degoni by any chance? Art Degoni was Dean of the University of the Pacific. I worked with him for many years at Pacific at the American Dental Association and afterwards. One of his favorite sayings was, we spend a number of years with the students where we develop them as people who along the way become dentists. And I've never forgotten that, because to me, the purpose of dental school is not just learning the technical skills, it's also learning more about what it means to be human and interact with other people. It's very important. So when we look at this, yes, having a balanced lifestyle is important. It's still a very rigorous program. I don't want to make it sound like, you know, it's not. But you're doing the bulk of it by interacting, by being involved with your education, rather than sitting in a lecture hall having somebody talk with you. I think that's very important. I do want to say one final thing about preparing for residencies. Our first class was the class of 2015. And Dr. Carroll, who's our Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, and I were leaving one evening when we noticed a group of the class of 2015 in one of the breakout rooms together. And we noticed further that it was the group applying to postdoctoral residencies, and they were in there talking with each other. So we got curious. We went in and said, "So what's going on?" They said, "Well, we're talking about what we've been asked in interviews, and we're each practicing how to respond to the question." Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. In most schools, people are competing against each other to try to get the advantage to get in. Our students understand that if they collaborate and help each other become better, there's a better chance that we're going to get more of them in. And that's part of the reason why we have such a high percentage of people getting into programs, is they work with each other to help each other master these things. It's very different than what you see at many programs. Other questions?
All right, now it's the other question. So Scott's, what is the suckiest part about dental school? What's the worst thing about dental school?
I would just say I mean, it's expected, but they're definitely a step up from undergrad classes. You know, you're used to these, maybe a microbio from undergrad or maybe chemistry, but now since you're doing it at the grad level, there's just a lot more info. For instance, taking anatomy at undergrad might be learning the bones of the body and the simple stuff. Now when you're doing the head and neck anatomy at dental school, it is so much more involved. There's so many things to learn, veins, nerves, arteries, everything to it. So it's just a lot, but I think we all understand that when we come into school. So that's probably the worst part about it.
If I had to say, I know it was mentioned earlier that you spend a lot of time at the school instead of spending, you know, an hour in OChem and then going home and studying or whatever. You spend, I mean, it's kind of like an 8 to 5 o'clock sort of thing here. And I mean, at other schools, I know it's far more intense, but so I would say it's just like you got to be used to staying at the school a lot longer, and in comparison to, you know, Boise State. But I've really enjoyed it. I think honestly, I feel like I do better when I'm more involved in things. So I've actually enjoyed dental school more than undergrad. So that's just me.
Well, I assume it's a full-time job. Like, that's all you're doing. So you probably do enjoy it because that's all you're doing. That's your job. So I think that's pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that. My last question, and then I want to open it for more questions. Students, please ask them or I will. What do you wish Boise State would have provided you, or what do you wish you would have known before going in? You're not going to hurt my feelings.
I think Boise State's focus sometimes was on a different portion of biology, and I kind of wish there was more classes geared towards like head and neck. I know it was within our catalog, but we just didn't have anyone to teach it when I was there. If we would have had a class like that, it would have been obviously very beneficial having learned that ahead of time, but that's probably all I can think of. I think Boise State did still a decent job at preparing me for classes here.
Echo what Scott said. I really enjoyed Boise State. I don't have anything, you know, I don't hold anything against it. Yeah, I would say probably just the depth of the courses in grad school is different, right? And it's something that I think is just common, but it's something that you have to prepare for.
Can I add something?
Please.
There are two things that I want to say. First of all, I first started getting to know Boise State in 1990, and in that period of time, I have never had one of your students who has been in trouble in dental school. You're preparing them very well. So I think that's good. If I were looking at something that I think we're going to be talking about, and this may shock a couple people on the phone call because, or on the Zoom, because I haven't talked with them about it yet. I think our admissions committee is going to be talking about adding a prerequisite in some area of genetics. And when we look at what's happening in the world of genetics, I mean, none of us have missed what's gone on with the vaccines. It's related to genetics. We look at many of the proposed treatments that are coming up. I think more background in genetics may be appropriate. I just don't know what to suggest there yet, and that's part of what our admissions committee will talk about. But when I look at it, I think a little bit more focus in that area would be useful.
That's good news, considering we usually recommend that all of our students take it.
Yeah.
We have them
We're on the
take
same
genetics
page
and
as usual.
biochemistry. Usually those are the two that we
Yeah.
really push students to try and consume if they can, as upper division science classes go. But yeah. Cool. Students, Courtney, Amy, anything else? It's 5:30. I know your time's valuable, and I know all these folks' time's valuable too. But other questions you have that maybe I stirred the pot?
I guess like my last question is, what is like the biggest piece of advice you have for the application process?
For the application process, do it in teams.
Yeah, for the directed to the students.
To anyone.
And I want to add one thing, Amy, before other people. I think one of your biggest focuses should be to show your humanness.
Mm-hmm.
Every single applicant is intelligent. Every single applicant is hardworking. Every single applicant has accomplished a lot of things. What we need to see is that you're a human with a heart, and that you see other humans around you and you connect to those humans. So in your personal statement, in your application, in your interview, it goes back to what Dr. Harmon was saying about writing about these transformational moments. Show us your humanness and show us how your humanness is going to bless the life of other humans with you being a dentist. I think that should be your focus.
The other thing I'd recommend is you work in teams on your applications. I mean, I know that you're going to be working with your advisors, but I'd also run stories past your classmates. Let them do the same for you. Use your digital devices, whether they're cell phones or computers, to record yourself telling your stories. Here's a tip. When you have a story, do it 3 times in a row using different language each time. Don't repeat the same way of doing it. And what it does is develop your flexibility for telling the story so that it doesn't sound rehearsed. It's very important. So those are a couple of other tips that I will tell you that we teach in Road to Residencies, is if you work together, you help the other person, they help you, or if it's a small group, you just run your stories past them and say, how did that sound to you? What did you like? What didn't you like? Sort of use it as an instant poll on how it's sounding. But the important thing is run the stories at least 3 times. If we were there in person, I would be asking you, so why do you want to be a dentist? And after you finished giving me a short version of it, I said, tell me again, but don't use any of the same language. And then I'll ask it a 3rd time. And then at one, I don't think either of you were with me on that trip, but we were out at UC in San Diego. The person challenged me. She said, so how many are the most number of times you do it? We went to 7. And every time she did it, she found something else that was of meaning to her. And when she did her final 7th one, it was magnificent. But the key thing here is not to rehearse a specific language pattern, but the concepts that you want to get across. And you do that by using different language every time.
Scott, the 2 Scotts probably aren't aware that we've kind of changed our format here at Boise State University in our advising office for the pre-health students. And I hope Amy and Courtney know and still recognize when we send out the emails about the cohort meetings. We've had to focus our cohort meetings more focused on virtual settings because of COVID, but we've hosted them every month for our freshmen, upperclassmen, and application groups. So they each have their own cohort that they are a member of, and they kind of transition to each one as they get through their steps. So like, for example, Amy is moving on to application cohort at some point. And so basically they can team up and they can do those very things. They can have that relationship with each other and be like, oh, I feel this way. And so the application cohort group that worked this year, they're going to be in the application process this summer. And so they can do those very things. They can bounce stuff off of each other, and they can bounce stuff off of us. It gave us a way to give material to them. And so again, I encourage you as students to participate in those things along with these opportunities, because I'm a believer that students, you need to hear it more than once, right? You may have heard it from me, but maybe it didn't stick, and that's okay. But maybe you heard it from someone here today that's more of an expert, and you go, wow, that made sense to me, the way it was said that way. So I'm really appreciative of everyone in the room that could come and talk to everybody, and the students. I appreciate you asking the questions you've asked. I hope this was of value to you. I was going to ask one final follow-up question was, are you guys, is Roseman going to do some kind of a simulation again this summer, like a virtual simulation or like
For pre-dental students?
Yeah, these two are, Amy and Courtney are both pre-dental.
Actually, no, I was making sure I was answering the right question.
Yeah, like your simulation day that you guys have done.
Yeah, we're likely to do 2 of them this year, possibly 3. Depending on where we are with the pandemic and what the guidance is, we'd like to do it in person.
Sure.
If not, we did a virtual one last year that I think was very successful. We've come up with some ways to improve it even more than what we did. So we may have virtual, in person, or some combination thereof, because I've even talked about different ways that we could make that work. And the nice thing about virtual, it also opens up the possibility of doing it over multiple weekends rather than one. So we're good with that. By fall, assuming that we are back to normal, we will be doing a fall pre-dental one as well. We're working on that.
And with that, our student organization that hosts that is called IDEA.
Yep.
They have various social media pages, and that's where they will post and advertise.
Yeah.
If we are doing one later in May in the spring, that'll all be there. So I recommend, following them to get updates to see, where we're at with that.
And I would encourage you to, I just recommend you to send me something, because we always just post it out to the pre-dental group. So we do have a pre-dental club, and then we have just a group of students who say they're pre-dental who maybe don't associate themselves with the club necessarily, but I know that several of the students, I think Scott, I think you did one when it was live and in person, but every student who's come back from your simulation experience has raved about it. So I do want to open that to Amy and Courtney and say, when those come out, please, if you can make those opportunities happen, they're huge.
Well, I want to add something to what you just said, and I'm so glad to hear that your students came back and raved about. That's terrific news. But I will tell you, one of the things that we do immediately after the workshop is we get together and we say, what went well? Let's celebrate that. What could we have done better? And we come up with different ideas. And when I look at some of the things, again, from the disruptor creating possibilities that we talked about earlier, when I look at what they've come up with to make this work in a pandemic time, it has changed the way that we're looking at doing it even when we come back together. I think it's going to be even more effective. So that'll be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And yes,
so I just
Annie will make sure that you're on the list, so that's not a problem.
Great. Well, thank you all tonight. I'm going to turn the recording off.